Thank you very much. And I would like to start with thanking the Estonian Ministry of Regional Affairs and Agriculture for inviting the Swedish Ministry of Finance to this very interesting conference. And I think although all countries and indeed all municipalities have individual challenges, there are also many common challenges. So I think this is a good opportunity to meet and discuss these challenges. I will start off by giving a very short introduction to the system of local governance in Sweden, and I will then present some of the long-term challenges that Swedish municipalities face, and conclude the presentation with some of the recent reforms and current initiatives that are aimed to combat these challenges. And I think both the problem description and many of the initiatives that I will present are based on a large municipal inquiry that took place in 2020. So in this inquiry, a committee of parliamentarians from the national level and also local politicians from different political parties were assisted by experts to do a thorough analysis of the current situation for Swedish municipalities and also to look ahead on what challenges they are going to face. And they gave many suggestions. So we are implementing quite a lot of them, not quite all of them, but many. So Sweden is a unitary state, but we still have a very long and strong tradition of local self-governance, both for municipalities and for regions. And I will focus on the municipalities, but much of what I will say is also true for regions. The principle of local self-government is protected by the Constitution, and this principle includes the power of taxation, so the municipalities and regions can tax the inhabitants' incomes, and this accounts for about 2/3 of the municipal incomes. The state can, through acts of parliaments, give and take away tasks to municipalities, so there is no permanent division of tasks between the state and the municipalities in the Constitution. And when a new task is given, the state should also provide financing so that the municipalities do not have to raise the taxes. And actually this is not regulated in a law, but it's a sort of a political agreement that has been in effect for about 30 years. And the parliament has used their mandate quite vitally, so the municipal sector is quite a bit larger than the state sector now, and is tasked with providing most of the welfare services to the population. So Sweden is thus very decentralized. And as a rule, tasks are given symmetrically, meaning that all municipalities have the same tasks and responsibilities. There are some exceptions, but not very many. As you can see on the map, there are 290 municipalities. And as you can also see, they vary significantly in size, and not only in geographical size, but also population size, population density, and the socioeconomic status of its inhabitants. So this means that the municipalities operate under quite different circumstances. And there is a local government equalization system that is designed to, as far as possible, compensate for these differences by reallocating funds between municipalities and also between the regions. And the state contributes around 13 billion euros annually to the system. So actually it is only about 10 municipalities that actually pay money into the system, while the rest of the municipalities just get money from the system. And about 100 municipalities receive more than 25% of their funding from the system. So it's a quite significant part of at least some municipalities' funding. So if we move on to some long-term challenges, I think it's quite clear that the Swedish municipalities are faced with a number of challenges, and many are specific to the different tasks that have been given to them. But if we are going to concentrate on sort of the one main overarching long-term challenge, I would say it is the capacity to continue to deliver welfare services of a high quality in the face of a shifting demography with an aging population. And this because it strains the economy, and it also makes it quite hard to find qualified staff. And just to give you an idea of the scope of the problem, demographic projections estimates that the population of people that are over 80 years old will increase with almost 50% until 2031, which could, for example, mean that the municipal elderly care may have to increase with 30% under the same period. And the Swedish Association of Local and Regional Authorities have estimated that the municipalities will need to hire over 400,000 new employees in that same period. And this will be, of course, a significant challenge, both in terms of finding the staff and finding the money to pay them. And although this is will be a challenge for all municipalities, it is evident that it is a much more acute problem for rural municipalities with low population density. And this is especially so since rural communities tend to have an older population. So basically, the trend is that the young move to urban areas, whereas the elderly remain in the rural areas where they've lived their whole lives. And I thought I would just give you some figures to just show how different the Swedish municipalities are. So if we look at the geographical size, the smallest municipality is 9 square kilometers, whereas the large one is almost 20,000 square kilometers. So it's almost half the size of Estonia. If you look at the population density, this map is of the population density. It's not quite updated. I think it's about 5 years old, but it shows sort of general picture. And actually now the least densely populated municipality has just 0.2 inhabitants per square kilometer, whereas the most densely populated one has 6,200 inhabitants per square kilometer. And as you can see, the southern part of Sweden are much more densely populated than the north, and especially the northwestern parts have a very low population density. And there are also other demographic factors. So the mean incomes per inhabitant in a year varies from around 25,000 euros to over 40,000 euros in the municipalities. The percentage of inhabitants of working age that are currently employed vary from about 73% to 89%, and the average age vary from 37 to 51. So the municipalities are quite different. And I think there's no simple solution to the problem of lack of capacity. At least we have not been able to find one yet. But there is much work being done in different fields to try to reduce the problem. And I will describe some of the actions that the state has recently taken and some that are being investigated currently. And I will focus on sort of actions that are directed directly at the municipalities, but there are also, of course, other actions that will also play a big role. So, for example, Sweden is successively elevating the retirement age. So I think that will help. So I will focus on what the state is doing, but in the end, and in keeping with the principle of local self-government, most of the work will have to be done by the municipalities themselves, I think. So some of the recent reforms and ongoing inquiries, and I think you can divide this into structural reforms and reforms that are more aimed at increasing efficiency. So if we start with the structural reforms, I think one way to strengthen the capacity and resilience of municipalities is to make them larger. As I mentioned earlier, the population size differs significantly between municipalities. The smallest municipality has about 2,200 inhabitants, and the largest has almost 1 million. And this difference is forecasted to grow in coming years. And as I said earlier, we give tasks symmetrically, so the smallest municipality has the same obligations as the largest one. So this is a bit of a problem. So we have an ongoing inquiry, which is tasked to find out if there is an interest in implementing voluntary mergers, and also to suggest how the government can support such mergers. And I would say that in general, the municipalities have not shown a great interest in voluntary mergers. So I think it's fair to say that this initiative is not likely to result in a large reform right away. But I think it's a way to sort of start a discussion and also to identify factors that could that the state could do to make it more appealing for the municipalities to merge. An alternative to mergers is increased intermunicipal cooperation, where municipalities can pool their resources and jointly organize welfare services or share experts, since it's quite hard for especially rural municipalities to find qualified workers. And the Local Government Act, which is the sort of main act that about the organization of the municipalities, it has for a long time allowed for different forms of structured cooperation between municipalities through municipal federations, joint committees, and jointly owned companies. And these different methods have been quite successful, but they're also quite administratively demanding. So in 2018, the law was amended to allow for contractual cooperation. So now one municipality can basically procure a service from another municipality. And this has become very popular. So it was a very successful reform, I think. And I think overall, I think it's fair to say that especially smaller municipalities would not be able to perform all their obligations without intermunicipal cooperation. So I think it's likely that this different forms of cooperation will continue to increase. There are also ongoing debates on whether the state should assume the responsibility for certain tasks that are currently municipal. Now, I think the rationale behind this discussion is not primarily to make it easier for municipalities, but rather to ensure that the services are given equally in the whole country. Still, I think a potential side effect of such reforms would be that the pressure of the municipalities could be reduced somewhat. So, for example, a recent inquiry explored the possibility of lifting the responsibility for the schools to the state level. But this inquiry showed that this would be a very large and complicated reform, and that it could take up to 20 years to implement it. So the government has not so far taken any decision to start such a reform, but I have so far instead focused more on, for example, increasing the state's role in the financing of the schools to make it more equal. Another inquiry recently suggested that the state should take full responsibility for decisions on and the financing of personal assistance to persons with certain functional impairments. And this is currently a shared responsibility between the state and the municipalities. And I think these suggestions have been met with large support, so the government is now currently analyzing how to move forward. And just to mention, one third inquiry that has just been launched that will investigate the possibility of relieving the regions from the obligation to provide health care. And I think this would be similarly to the potential reform on schools. It would be very large reforms that would take a long time to implement. So in the meantime, there have been several initiatives that have been launched to make it easier to get health care from other regions if your own region cannot manage in time, and to increase the interoperability of the digital healthcare systems. And we're also looking at the financial equalization system. So, as I said earlier, the aim of the financial equalization system is to ensure that municipalities have equal economic conditions. That is, it aims to compensate for the differences in taxable incomes and structural factors that the municipality cannot change, such as population density and the age of the population. And there is now an ongoing inquiry that examines whether the system works as intended. One thing that suggests that it might not be working perfectly is that there's a great spread in the municipal tax rates. So the combined municipal and regional tax rates varies between 28 and 35%. So one of the job of this inquiry is to try to find out why there is such a large difference. If it is because of some municipalities prioritize a high level of service, or is it because some are more efficient than others, or is it because this equalization system is not managing to compensate for structural factors and differences in taxable income. So we're also looking at reforms for increasing efficiency, or helping the municipalities to become more efficient. So I think there is widespread hope that digitalization and automation will aid and relieve the municipalities and the municipal workers. And there are many ongoing initiatives that aim to, for example, create a common digital infrastructure for the whole public sector, which would make it easier to communicate and share information and reduce administration. And I think this is an area where Sweden has fallen behind many other countries, such as Estonia. So I think the Swedish private sector has for a long time been at the forefront of digitalization, but the public sector has not. And I think it's been a problem for especially the municipalities and regions to sort of come together to find agreement on which systems to use and so on. So I think the state is now trying to take a little bit more active role to set down standards to make all systems interoperable, for example. Another reform in this area is that the Local Government Act was amended last year in order to allow the municipalities to delegate decision-making authority to automated functions. And the background to this is that many state administrative agencies have successfully used automated decision-making for a long time, which have led to great efficiency gains. And I think it's too early to say whether similar gains will be possible for the municipalities, but at least now they have the opportunity to use this technology. So digitalization is certainly one piece of the puzzle, but in order to meet the challenges of lack of staff and limited resources, I think it's important that the municipalities also think more broadly on how to become more efficient and creative. So in order to encourage experiments, an inquiry was set up to support municipal experiments. And the work of this inquiry is based on a bottom-up methodology. So it's the municipalities and regions that can suggest trials and experiments, and the state's role is to support and evaluate these experiments. So initially, this inquiry focused on experiments which could be done without changing any legislation. And these experiments are ongoing, and they concern, for example, finding new ways for municipalities and regions to collaborate, and also to build common digital infrastructures. And the inquiry has now moved on to the second part of its task, which is to look at trials where you need to temporarily change the legislation to make it possible. So they're currently going through the applications from municipalities and to decide which experiments they will suggest to the government to support. And so, to conclude, we see that the municipalities' challenges are likely to grow in the next 10 years, primarily because of demographic changes. And the government is looking at different ways to help the municipalities face these challenges by trying to give municipalities the necessary tools in legislation and also sort of good financial conditions. But I think, as always, in the end, it will be, to a large extent, also up to the municipalities to do the work to become more efficient. And I am sure that they will be able to shoulder that responsibility. And so, thank you very much.